Where the Storm Sleeps. Chapter 1. The Tide Between Them. The night had no patience. The wind came in restless gusts, snapping at the rigging and slapping the hulls. The harbor lights trembled on the black water. He stood at the edge of the dock, collar turned up, cigarette trembling between his fingers, and thought that storms were the only honest thing left in this town. Then he saw her. She stood near the last boat in the line, red coat pulled tight around her, hair plastered against her face. The sea spray caught the light and made her look like she was vanishing and reappearing at the same time. For a moment he thought it was her, the woman he'd lost, and the thought hit him like a wave he hadn't braced for. When she turned, the resemblance faded, but not completely. Enough to keep him rooted where he was. "You'll get soaked out here," he said. His voice sounded rougher than he intended. "I don't mind," she replied, without looking at him. He walked closer, boots loud on the wet planks. The smell of rain and diesel filled the air. "Storm's coming fast. You shouldn't be near the water." She turned then, calm, almost amused. "Neither should you." That made him laugh, a quiet, short sound, half cough, half memory. "Fair enough." Lightning cracked above the bay. The sea moved like something alive and angry. He watched the sky, then her. "My boat's right there," he said, nodding toward the small vessel rocking against the pier. "You can wait it out if you want. It's not much, but it's dry." For a second, she seemed to hesitate. Then she nodded and followed. The cabin smelled of salt, coffee, and old wood. He set down a lantern and poured 2 fingers of rum into tin cups. The rain began in earnest, a steady hiss on the roof. She took the cup, hands trembling slightly from the cold. "Do you live here?" "Sometimes," he said. "Depends on the weather." "Must get lonely." "It does," he said. "But you stop minding after a while." She smiled faintly. "That sounds sad." "It's just quiet." He sat across from her. The lantern light wavered between them. Her eyes were green, or maybe gray, hard to tell in the stormlight. "What brings you out here?" he asked. She hesitated. "I could ask you the same." He nodded. "You could, but I asked first." She took a sip before answering. "I came to watch the sea." He raised an eyebrow. "In a storm?" "In any weather," she said. "It doesn't change much. Only shows more of itself when it's angry." That made him look away. Her words were something the other one might have said years ago, on a night not unlike this one. The past came without warning. He was back in that small apartment by the bridge, the window rattling from a gentler rain. The letter lay on the table beside her coffee cup. He'd found it there that morning. Pages folded carefully, his name written in the slanted hand he'd always loved. He had read it once, and again, and then a third time when the light shifted across the floor. The words didn't change. She had written about silence, about fear, about how love turns into something sharp when you hold it too long. When she came in, he was still holding the paper. "You read it," she said. "I did." "Then you know." "I'm not sure I do." She looked at him for a long moment, then sat down, resting her elbows on the table. "You were never cruel," she said softly. "Only afraid." He didn't answer. There was nothing to say that would sound like truth. A clap of thunder pulled him back. The woman in the cabin flinched, spilling a little rum on her coat. He stood, handed her a rag. "Thanks," she murmured. "Don't worry about it." He looked out through the small round window. Rain lashed sideways now, the sea rising against the docks. "We might be here a while." "That's all right. Most people don't find storms all right." "I'm not most people." He smiled at that. "I can tell." She was quiet a long moment, then asked, "What's your name?" He hesitated. "Tom." "Tom," she repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "I'm Claire." The name hit something inside him. His heart gave a small, reluctant thud. That wasn't her name, but it was close enough to sting. "Claire," he said. "Pretty name." "It was my mother's." He nodded, not trusting himself to say more. The lantern flickered as the wind pressed against the hull. She reached out, steadying it with one hand. "You really think it'll hold?" "It's held worse," he said. "You sound sure." He poured another measure of rum. "I've learned not to trust the sea, but I respect her. That's what keeps me alive." She smiled faintly. "You talk like someone who's lost something out there." He looked at her, then away. "Maybe. I'm sorry." "Don't be. Everyone loses something eventually." They sat in silence after that, the kind that feels full rather than empty. The rain softened, then grew loud again, a rhythm older than speech. Years earlier, he had walked the length of that same bridge where they used to meet on Sundays. The city had changed around him. The bakery was gone. The theater boarded up. The past shrinks when you look at it straight on, but it never disappears. He remembered her last words. You will. He hadn't known what she meant. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe understanding. He never wrote her back. Never sent a word. But he carried that letter folded in his wallet for years, until the sea took the wallet and half his gear in a storm off Lisbon. He took that as the sea's mercy, or its judgment. Now, watching this new woman, this Claire, he felt the same ache that had driven him away before. He wondered what the difference really was between love and repetition. She caught him looking. You seem far away. Maybe I am. Old ghosts. He nodded slowly. Something like that. She leaned back, letting the lantern light touch her face. Do you believe in second chances? Not much, he said. The world doesn't hand them out. Maybe it does, she said. Just not to the same people. He looked at her then, really looked, and felt the strange weight of her words settle in him. The storm grew meaner. The ropes outside sang. The hull groaned as waves slapped against it. He checked the lines, tightening what he could, then came back inside. She was standing by the porthole, watching the lightning. It's beautiful, she said. It's dangerous. Those aren't opposites. He laughed quietly. You sound like someone I used to know. Lucky woman. He shook his head. Not really. Why not? I wasn't the man she needed. And now? He thought about it. Now I'm just the man who's still trying to understand what that means. They passed an hour that way. Talking, not talking, listening to the world shake itself apart. She told him about the places she'd been, the cities she left behind. He spoke little, offering only fragments, as if each word cost him. Somewhere near midnight, the storm shifted direction. The boat rocked harder, then steadied. A low creak came from beneath the deck. She looked toward the sound. Is that normal? Nothing's normal tonight, he said. Water began to seep through the seams by the door. He grabbed a bucket and began to bail. She joined him without a word. They worked side by side, soaked, hands cold and raw. Between them, silence became something shared, an understanding without confession. When the worst had passed, they sat again. The lantern was dying, the air thick with the smell of salt and rust. You ever think about leaving? She asked softly. Where would I go? Anywhere that's not here. He smiled tiredly. Every place becomes here after a while. Outside, the thunder rolled farther away. The rain softened to a mist. She took off her coat and draped it over a chair to dry. Beneath it, her blouse clung to her shoulders. He looked away, but too late. She noticed. You don't have to be polite, she said. I'm not, he said. Just cautious. Of what? Of what happens when storms end. She studied him. You mean the quiet? He nodded. It's always louder than the wind. She reached across the small table and touched his hand. Her fingers were cold, but her touch was steady. You don't have to be afraid of quiet, she said. He didn't answer. He just looked at her hand on his and remembered another hand. Another night, the sound of rain softer than this. A goodbye whispered instead of said. In the past, he had watched her walk away down that narrow street. She didn't look back. He wanted to call out. Something simple, like wait, or come back, or even don't, but the word stuck. After that, days became years without ceremony. He worked on boats, repaired engines, moved from port to port. The letter went with him, folded so many times the creases tore. He sometimes wondered if she ever thought of him, if she had sent another letter he never received. Then he'd remind himself it didn't matter. The sea doesn't answer questions. It only repeats them. The lantern went out. They sat in darkness, the sound of water still around them, softer now, like breathing. You ever think the sea keeps secrets? She asked. All the time. Then maybe it keeps ours, too. He thought about that. Maybe. They listened to the rain until it became a rhythm like sleep. Then she said, very quietly, You don't know me, do you? He turned toward her, though he couldn't see her face. Should I? There was a pause. No, but you remind me of someone. So do you, he said. The silence that followed was heavier than any wave. At dawn, the storm was gone. The world smelled of salt and light. He stepped out onto the deck. The sky was pale, washed clean. The sea stretched in every direction, calm but endless. The pier was gone from sight, only horizon. He stood there a long time, trying to remember if he had tied the moorings right. Maybe the storm had pulled them loose. Maybe he hadn't cared enough to check. When he turned, the cabin door was open. The red coat was still hanging on the chair, damp and empty. He called out once. No answer. Only the sea, whispering against the hull. He looked for footprints, but the deck was smooth and dry. After a moment, he sat down where she had been. The sun rose slow and indifferent. He took the tin cup, drank the last of the cold rum, and watched the horizon. Somewhere out there, he thought, the letters still floated. Ink washed away, words turned to salt. He wondered if she had ever really been there at all. Chapter 2. What the Sea Remembers. The morning came thin and silver. He sat on the deck, watching the horizon for a long time before standing. The air smelled of rust and sun. The red coat still hung over the chair where she'd left it, dripping slowly into a tin pan. He touched the fabric. It was cold. "Claire," he called. Nothing but gulls. He waited, because waiting was the only thing he had ever done well. When the tide pulled back, he started the motor and turned toward the harbor. The engine coughed, then caught. It sounded tired, like him. The docks were quiet when he reached them. Nets lay in heaps, slick and gray. A boy from one of the trawlers watched him tie up. "Rough night?" the boy asked. Could say that. Lose anything? He thought about that. Maybe found something instead. The boy looked puzzled but said nothing. He walked toward town. The streets were still wet. Sunlight pooled in the cracks. At the cafe near the pier, he ordered black coffee and sat by the window. The waitress, an older woman with hair the color of salt, recognized him. "Haven't seen you in months," she said. "I've been out. Always are. You look like the sea spat you out." He smiled faintly. Wouldn't be the first time. She poured the coffee, glanced at the coat folded beside him. "Nice color," she said. "Doesn't seem like yours." "It's not." She forget it? He hesitated. "Something like that." "Well," she said, "if she's smart, she'll come back for it." He nodded. The smell of coffee filled the air, rich and bitter. For a moment, the sound of the waves outside seemed to fade, and another sound rose instead, the click of a typewriter, soft, steady, like rain on glass. The past leaned in. She had written beside that same cafe window years ago, tapping keys with 2 fingers. The letter that would never be sent. He could see her shoulders, narrow and certain, the way she bit the inside of her lip when she searched for words. He'd stood outside, watching through the glass, unable to walk in. The war had changed him. The city had changed her. He'd turned away before she saw him. But later that night, she came to his apartment with the finished letter. "I wrote it for me, not for you," she said. "Then why bring it here?" She looked at him and smiled. "Because I knew you'd never write first." The memory was so clear he could smell her perfume again, that faint citrus she wore in summer. He blinked hard. The cafe light shifted. The waitress was gone. The chair across from him was empty. He left money on the table and stepped outside. The day had turned bright, but the brightness felt false, like light in a photograph. Down near the jetty, a fisherman was mending a line. "Any luck?" Tom asked. The man looked up. "Luck's just another word for tide," he said, and went back to work. Tom walked on until the town thinned into scrub and rock. He found himself at the cliff path that overlooked the bay. From here he could see the whole curve of the coast, the harbor, the lighthouse, the open sea beyond. For a moment he thought he saw her, a small figure in red walking along the waterline. He blinked, and she was gone. Wind tore through the grass. The sea below breathed like a living thing. He closed his eyes. The sound of the surf turned into footsteps on wooden floors, the smell of salt into the smell of her hair. Years earlier, she'd stood in the doorway of his flat, holding a packed suitcase. "You'll hate yourself if you stay," she'd said. "I already do. Then go somewhere else and learn to forgive." He laughed, tired. "That easy?" "No," she said, "but necessary." He'd watched her cross the street, her reflection breaking in the puddles. When the door closed, he'd looked around and realized everything left behind was just furniture without her voice in it. He opened his eyes. The cliffs were the same. The sea hadn't moved, not really. It never did. He turned back toward town and saw a shape near the path, a woman sitting on a rock, writing in a small notebook. Her hair was loose, wind-blown. She looked up as he passed. "Afternoon," he said. "Hello," she answered. Her voice, steady, familiar. He stopped. "We met last night, didn't we?" She frowned slightly. "I don't think so. You were at the pier." "The red coat." She looked at the coat draped over his arm.